You won't believe how a simple pair of AirPods turned my entire life upside down. Stick around, because this story gets wild fast. It all started on an ordinary Thursday. I had taken my car in for servicing, so I borrowed my wife's instead. We do this kind of thing all the time. Switch cars when one of us needs repairs or maintenance. I didn't think twice about it when I opened the door and slid into the driver's seat of her SUV. The faint scent of her lavender air freshener greeted me, along with a half-empty bottle of sparkling water in the cup holder. Normal. Familiar. That was the last time anything about my marriage would feel normal. As I drove to the office, I heard a dull thud in the center console when I hit the brakes at a red light. I reached over, curious about what had shifted. That's when I saw them. A sleek, white case with a faint smudge of fingerprints on its glossy surface. AirPods. My wife doesn't own AirPods. She's always said they'd be too easy to lose. She prefers over-ear headphones, the kind that clamp on like a vice when she's on her treadmill. So, naturally, I assumed they weren't hers. Maybe a friend had left them? I popped open the case out of habit, just to check if they were charged. To my surprise, a small blue light blinked back at me, and my phone buzzed with a connection notification, Liam's AirPods. Now, this might seem innocent enough, but here's where my brain started racing. Liam? I didn't know any Liams, and as far as I was aware, neither did my wife. Her closest male friends had names like Chris, Mike, or Paul. Liam didn't fit, but it wasn't just the name that bothered me. It was the casual sense of ownership radiating from those words, Liam's AirPods. This wasn't a random coworker or friend. These weren't shared AirPods or loaner AirPods. These belonged to Liam, and Liam's property was sitting in my wife's car. By the time I got to work, I couldn't shake the weird feeling the discovery had stirred in me. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. People lose things all the time, right? It's not like there's a rule against dropping your earbuds in someone else's car. Still, I had questions. Did my wife mention someone named Liam, and I just forgot? I decided to ask her about it that evening, casually, without making it a big deal. But as the hours dragged on, I found myself replaying little moments in my head. Her late nights at work, her suddenly finding reasons to go to the gym twice as often, her phone, which she'd started keeping face down on the counter. Maybe I was connecting dots that didn't exist, or maybe my gut knew something I hadn't admitted yet. That night, over dinner, I brought it up. She was halfway through a bite of roasted salmon when I said, "Hey, I found a pair of AirPods in your car today. Any idea whose they are?" She paused, her fork hovering midair. A flicker of something crossed her face. Was it surprise? Annoyance? I couldn't tell. "Oh," she said, swallowing quickly. "Probably one of the girls from yoga. They're always losing their stuff." "Yoga?" I repeated, trying to keep my tone light. "Do any of them happen to be named Liam?" Her laugh was too quick, too forced. "No, silly. Obviously not. I don't know. Maybe someone left them in the parking lot, and they ended up in my car somehow." "Right. Makes sense," I said, though it didn't. She changed the subject immediately, launching into a story about some drama at work. I nodded along, but my mind wasn't on her words. Something about her reaction felt off. Forced, like she had been caught off guard and scrambled for an explanation. But I didn't press her. Not yet. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. My wife wasn't the kind of person to lie, or at least, I didn't think she was. Maybe I was overreacting. People lose things all the time. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that Liam wasn't just a name on a screen. He was the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. The next morning, I woke up early. My wife was still asleep, her face peaceful, as if she hadn't a care in the world. I, on the other hand, felt like my chest had a vice grip around it. I couldn't stop thinking about those AirPods. There was something about the whole situation that gnawed at me in a way I couldn't ignore. Before heading to work, I decided to check one last time. I took the AirPods case out of my bag and opened it. My phone connected instantly, Liam's AirPods. That name stared back at me like an accusation. I clicked around, trying to see if there was any more information. There wasn't. But then I had an idea. There's this feature in the Find My app where you can see the last known location of a connected device. I clicked on it, not really expecting much. To my surprise, a little green dot popped up on the map. It wasn't here. It was at some random address across town. The timestamp read, 2 days ago. 2 days ago. That was when my wife said she was working late. I felt my throat tighten. It didn't mean anything, I told myself. Maybe she gave someone a ride. Maybe it was something totally innocent. I'd ask her about it again, but I needed to keep digging for now. At work, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Spreadsheets, emails, meetings, all of it blurred together as my mind spiraled. By lunchtime, I was scrolling through forums and websites about lost gadgets, trying to figure out how to track down the AirPods' original owner. That's when I stumbled across a site dedicated to helping people find lost items connected to their devices. It had a feature where you could input the serial number of the gadget, and if the owner had registered it, their contact info might pop up. I pulled out the AirPods again and squinted at the tiny text on the underside of the case. Sure enough, there was a serial number. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Did I really want to go down this road? What if the answers I found weren't the ones I wanted? But the curiosity, the nagging suspicion, was too strong. I typed the number in and hit search. Nothing. Disappointment settled over me like a heavy cloud. But then I realized something. I had a friend who was great with tech. Someone who loved a good mystery. If anyone could help me figure out the story behind these AirPods, it was him. I called him up during my lunch break. "Hey, Jake," I said, trying to sound casual. "I've got a weird favor to ask." Jake was always up for something weird. "What's up?" I explained the situation without giving away too much. Just that I'd found the AirPods, was curious about their owner, and needed some help tracking them down. "Man, you've got too much time on your hands," he said with a laugh. "But sure, send me the info. I'll see what I can do." That night, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. My wife seemed her usual self, chatting about her day and making plans for the weekend. I watched her carefully, searching for any signs of guilt or nervousness, but there was nothing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this really was nothing. But then again, I thought about that address on the map, and the way her laugh had sounded when I'd asked about Liam. Jake called me the next afternoon. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "What?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "I found the owner." "Well, kind of. There's this guy. He registered the AirPods on that lost gadget site. His name is Liam." That name hit me like a sledgehammer. And I reached out to him, told him I'd found something that might belong to him. He replied right away, said he'd love to meet up to get them back. My mouth went dry. Did he say anything else? Not much. Just that he thinks he left them in someone's car a few days ago. Someone's car. My wife's car. When Jake told me he had arranged to meet Liam, my pulse quickened. "When's the meetup?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tomorrow afternoon." I figured I'd swing by his place since he seemed pretty eager to get them back, Jake replied, sounding nonchalant, like this was just another errand. But to me, it wasn't. Every fiber of my being was screaming that something was wrong, that this wasn't just some random coincidence. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were lining up in ways that made my stomach churn. That evening, I decided to broach the topic with my wife again. Not directly, but in a way that might coax more details out of her. As we sat down for dinner, I said, "Hey, funny thing about those AirPods I found in your car, one of my buddies is actually helping me track down the owner. He's pretty good with tech." Her reaction was subtle, but I caught it. A slight pause as she reached for her glass of wine. "Oh," she said, her voice light, but her eyes carefully avoiding mine. "Yeah," I continued, pretending not to notice. "Turns out they're registered to someone named Liam. You sure you don't know anyone by that name?" She set her glass down and let out a small laugh. "I told you, I don't. Must be someone who got into my car by accident or something. I mean, it's not like I lock it when I'm at the gym." The gym. There it was again. That excuse she'd been leaning on so heavily the past few months. "Yeah, maybe," I said, forcing a smile. "Just weird, you know?" She shrugged, her demeanor as calm as ever. "People lose stuff all the time. It doesn't mean anything." But it did mean something. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel it in my gut. After dinner, I went out for a walk. needing some fresh air to clear my head. My thoughts raced as I replayed our conversation. Was I overthinking this? Or was she trying to downplay something she didn't want me to find out? The next day at work, Jake called me again. I just dropped off the AirPods, he said. And? I asked, my voice tight. Well, Liam's a nice guy. Seemed pretty chill about the whole thing. But here's the kicker. When I handed them over, he asked where I found them. I told him it was a friend's car. You know what he said? I gripped my phone tighter. What? He said he knew exactly which car it was. Apparently, he's been riding around in it. The air seemed to leave my lungs. Did he say who owns the car? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake hesitated. Yeah. He said it belongs to some lady he's been, seeing. The words hit me like a freight train. My mind went blank for a moment as I tried to process what Jake had just said. Did he give a name? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, Jake admitted. But he was grinning when he said it, like he didn't care if I figured it out. The rest of Jake's words blurred together as my heart pounded in my ears. I mumbled a quick goodbye and hung up, my hands trembling. When I got home that evening, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. My wife was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked so normal, so familiar, and yet I couldn't shake the image of Liam's smug grin from my mind. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but something held me back. I needed more. More proof. More clarity. So I played along, pretending everything was fine. But inside, the storm was brewing, and it was only a matter of time before it broke loose. I didn't sleep that night. My wife, as usual, drifted off without a care in the world, her soft breathing filling the silence of our bedroom. Meanwhile, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense. Liam's words replayed in my mind. It belongs to some lady I've been seeing. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The excuses, the late nights, the gym sessions that seemed more like alibis than workouts, it all lined up. But a part of me still clung to hope. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Liam was mistaken or lying. After all, I didn't have anything concrete yet, just a gut feeling and some circumstantial evidence. The next morning, I left for work early, though I had no intention of going to the office. Instead, I drove to a nearby coffee shop, ordered a black coffee I barely touched, and pulled out my phone. I texted Jake, "Hey, can you meet up? Need to talk about Liam." His response came almost immediately. "Yeah, lunch break. Usual spot." I spent the next few hours alternating between staring at my phone and pacing the small cafe. When noon rolled around, I met Jake at a small diner we often went to. He was already seated in a corner booth, nursing a Coke. "Hey, man," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "You look like crap." "Thanks," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "I feel like crap." Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. "So, what's the deal? You think this Liam guy's telling the truth?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But if he's lying, it's a pretty specific lie. And everything he said lines up with stuff that's been bothering me for months." Jake frowned. "What are you gonna do?" I sighed, staring down at the chipped surface of the table. "I need proof. Something solid. I can't just accuse her without knowing for sure." "Fair," Jake said, nodding slowly. "But how are you gonna get it?" That was the question, wasn't it? I didn't have an answer yet. But then Jake said something that made my stomach drop. "You know, Liam seemed pretty cocky when I gave him the AirPods. Like he wasn't worried about being found out. I bet if you reached out to him, he'd spill everything." I stared at him, the thought sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. "You think he'd talk to me?" Jake shrugged. "Couldn't hurt to try. Worst case, he tells you to screw off." It felt risky, confrontational, but it was also my best shot at getting the truth. I nodded slowly. "Okay, do you still have his contact info?" Jake smirked. "Of course I do. I've got everyone's contact info." He pulled out his phone and forwarded me Liam's number. I stared at it for a long moment before saving it to my contacts. That evening, I waited until my wife had gone to bed before stepping out onto the porch with my phone in hand. The cool night air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My heart was pounding as I dialed the number, each ring ratcheting up my anxiety. Finally, a voice answered. "Hello? Liam?" I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah, who's this?" I swallowed hard. "You don't know me, but I think you know my wife." There was a pause, and then he laughed, a low, amused chuckle that made my blood boil. "Oh, wow," he said. "So she's married. That's interesting." I gritted my teeth, my grip tightening on the phone. "Just tell me the truth. Are you seeing her?" He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "Look, man, I'm not trying to start drama here. But yeah, we've been spending time together." My chest felt like it had caved in. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Couple of months," Liam said casually, like he was discussing the weather. She didn't mention she was married. Guess that's my bad for not asking. My head spun as his words sank in. Months. She'd been lying to me for months. The late nights, the gym, the laughter that no longer felt directed at me. All of it made sense now. I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead, I took a deep breath and asked, "Do you know where she is when she's with you?" "Usually at my place," he said, "or sometimes in her car." Her car. My car. Our life. It all felt like a cruel joke. "Thanks," I said, my voice tight. "No problem," Liam replied, as if he'd just helped a stranger find their lost wallet. I hung up and stood there in the cold, my mind racing. The truth was out now, undeniable and ugly. But the question remained, what was I going to do about it? The next morning, everything felt surreal, like I was trapped in a dream that refused to end. My wife moved around the house with her usual grace, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I couldn't look at her without hearing Liam's voice in my head. "Yeah, we've been spending time together." I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed to be absolutely sure. Part of me still clung to the possibility that Liam was lying, that this was some cruel misunderstanding. So, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. That evening, after my wife fell asleep, I went through her phone. It wasn't easy. She'd always been protective of her privacy, and I'd never felt the need to invade it before. But now, as I sat in the dim light of our bedroom, her phone unlocked in my hands, I told myself it was justified. I had to know the truth. I started with her messages. There was nothing suspicious in her recent texts, just the usual conversations with friends, coworkers, and family. But when I scrolled further back, I found a thread that had been archived. The contact wasn't saved, just a number. The conversation was brief, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Him, "Had a great time last night. Same time next week?" Her, "You're insatiable." Winky face. Him, "Only with you." The timestamps matched the nights she'd claimed to be working late. My hands trembled as I read the messages again, each word driving a dagger deeper into my chest. She had archived the chat, probably thinking I'd never think to look there. I wanted to stop, to close the phone and pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't. I opened her photos next, scrolling through her camera roll. At first, everything seemed normal. Pictures of us, her friends, her favorite dishes at restaurants. But then I found an album that was locked with a passcode. My stomach sank. She never used to lock anything on her phone. This was new, and I had no idea what the passcode might be. I tried a few guesses, her birthday, our anniversary, but nothing worked. Finally, I put the phone down, my heart pounding in my ears. I couldn't confront her without proof, not when she could still lie her way out of it. But now I knew where to look. The next day, I called Jake again. "I need your help," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Oh," he replied. "What now?" I told him everything, Liam's confession, the texts I'd found, the locked photo album. By the time I finished, Jake sounded as furious as I felt. "She's been playing you," he said, his voice tight. "You deserve better, man. What do you need from me?" "I need to know what's in that album," I said. "I need to see what she's hiding." Jake hesitated. "That's tricky. Breaking into someone's phone crosses a line. You know?" "I know," I said, my voice raw. "But she already crossed it first." Jake sighed. "All right, bring the phone to me, and I'll see what I can do." That evening, I waited for my wife to fall asleep again. My hands shook as I picked up her phone, guilt and anger warring within me. I told myself this was the only way to get the truth. I drove to Jake's apartment, the streets eerily quiet in the dead of night. When I handed him the phone, he gave me a long look. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. "Do it." Jake worked quickly, his fingers flying over his laptop keyboard as he connected the phone. I watched in silence, my heart pounding like a drum. After what felt like an eternity, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. "Got it," he said. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake hesitated, his eyes flicking to me. "You're not gonna like this. Just show me." He turned the laptop toward me, and my stomach dropped. The album was filled with photos, selfies mostly, of her and Liam. In some, they were at a bar, laughing together. In others, they were at his apartment, sitting too close, their smiles too intimate. But the ones that hit me the hardest were the ones in her car, the same car we'd shared for years. She looked so happy in those pictures, happier than she'd looked with me in a long time. I stared at the screen, the weight of betrayal crashing down on me like a tidal wave. There was no denying it now, no way to rationalize or explain it away. My wife was having an affair, and she didn't even seem to care enough to cover her tracks properly. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I couldn't fall apart, not yet. Not until I decided what to do next. The morning after Jake handed me the evidence, I could barely think straight. I drove home in a fog, replaying the images over and over in my mind. By the time I walked through the door, the anger had taken over. I didn't care about timing, tact, or restraint anymore. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a cup of tea in hand, looking every bit the picture of domestic bliss. The sight made my blood boil. I dropped my bag loudly on the counter, and she looked up, startled. "Hey," she said, smiling. "You're back early. Everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Everything is not okay." Her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" I pulled out my phone and tossed it onto the table, the screen still showing one of the damning photos Jake had recovered. She stared at it for a moment, her face pale. Then, to my disbelief, she laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Wow," she said, setting her phone down. "So you've been snooping through my stuff now? That's what you're going with?" I snapped. "That I'm the bad guy here because I found out about your affair?" She stood up, her posture rigid. "I don't know what you think you know, but it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I barked, my voice rising. "You've been seeing him for months. I spoke to him, for God's sake. He told me everything." Her expression hardened, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "You spoke to him? Are you kidding me? You had no right to invade my privacy like that." "Privacy?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're cheating on me, and you're talking about privacy?" "I'm not cheating," she said firmly, crossing her arms. "Liam and I are just friends." "Friends?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call sitting in his lap and making out in my car? Or spending the night at his place while I thought you were working late? Friends don't send each other texts about how insatiable they are." She flinched at that, her mask of composure slipping for just a moment. But then she straightened, her jaw tight. "All right," she said, her tone icy. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Liam. But it's not what you think. It's not about love or anything serious. I needed something different. Something you weren't giving me." Her words hit me like a slap. "Something I wasn't giving you?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "What the hell does that mean? I've given you everything, every part of me, and you threw it away for him?" She rolled her eyes, an exasperated sigh escaping her lips. "You don't understand. You've been so boring lately. Our life is boring. Liam made me feel alive again." "Alive?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed our marriage because you were bored? Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've taken from me?" She shrugged, her expression cold. "Maybe you should have tried harder to make me happy." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. I stared at her, the woman I had loved and trusted for years, and realized I didn't know her at all. "I want you out," I said finally, my voice low but firm. "What?" she said, her eyes narrowing. "You heard me. I want you out of this house. We're done." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You can't just kick me out. This is my house too." "Not anymore," I said, my voice hard. "You made your choice, and it wasn't me. So pack your things and go." She glared at me, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice venomous. "You'll see." But I didn't care. I was done fighting, done trying to understand. All I knew was that the woman standing in front of me was a stranger, and I wanted her out of my life. To be continued. The divorce proceedings were just as ugly as I expected. She fought me on everything. Our house, our savings, even the furniture. It wasn't about the money or the possessions. It was about control, about making me pay for exposing her lies. "You're being ridiculous," she hissed during one of our meetings with the lawyers. "You know I deserve half of everything." "You deserve nothing," I said coldly, meeting her glare with one of my own. "You threw this marriage away, not me." Her lawyer interjected, trying to de-escalate the tension, but I barely heard him. All I could think about was how far we'd fallen, how this woman I once loved was now my enemy. She made every step of the process a battle. She claimed she needed the house because it was her sanctuary, even though she was the one who had tainted it with her betrayal. She demanded spousal support, arguing that I had always been the primary breadwinner. But I stood my ground. "I'll give you the car," I said during one heated exchange. "The one you loved using for your little rendezvous. But you're not getting the house." Her face turned red, and for a moment, I thought she might explode. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "You're going to regret this, you know. You'll realize you're throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you." But her words rang hollow. The best thing in my life had been a lie. In the end, the court granted her a fraction of what she had asked for. She stormed out of the courtroom that day, her head held high, but I could see the bitterness in her eyes. As for me, I walked away with the house, the savings, and my dignity intact. But it didn't feel like a victory. The life I had built with her was gone, shattered beyond repair. One evening, weeks after the divorce was finalized, I sat in the empty house, staring at the wedding photo I hadn't yet taken down. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. "What's lost can't be returned," I whispered to myself, setting the photo face down on the table. I wasn't the same person I had been before all this. I was bruised, broken in places, but I was still standing. And as I looked out the window at the fading sunset, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have fought to salvage the pieces of a broken trust? Or walked away like I did, knowing that some wounds never truly heal?